Obviously, the first way to dispo deals was running the entire process yourself. That's how a lot of the wholesalers back in the day used to do it. And honestly, how a ton of wholesalers are even still doing it today. I mean, it's definitely an effective way to get deals done, to get money in your pocket, and to be successful as a wholesaler by handling the entire process of dispositions. Let's take a step-by-step guide into kind of what that looks like to handle that entire disposition process. So the first thing obviously you're going to want to do is begin to build a buyer's list. And how do you go about that? Well, some of the best ways, some of the most effective ways to build your buyer's list can be done through networking, like REI meetups, obviously things like these kind of calls, social media. So that's kind of what it looks like, right? And a pro tip to that, an action tip, is to make sure that you maintain an active relationship with the buyers that you're putting into this buyer's list, and having regular communication with them. So not only are you wanting to build that list, it's a real pro is going to learn to maintain that list as well. And it can be a laborsome process, but if you feel like that's kind of the way you want to go about it, that's how you need to go about it to be successful. And now let's say you've got, let's move to step 2 in the process of dispoing a deal. So now you've got your buyer's list built, you've gone out, you've done your networking, and you've got a small buyer's list put together, and you find a deal. You're going through DealMachine and you've got a deal lined up, you're getting it inked, and you're like, okay, I've got this buyer's list. Now you want to take and you want to market that deal to your buyers. And so you're marketing it, you're spending the time to put a marketing packet or something, some source of material together to get out to your buyers so that they can take a look at the deal that you have available. And then once you get it marketed, now you're going to start having these buyers calling in. And so the process then is to obviously start taking some of those calls, start answering the questions that the multiple buyers that are reaching out to you about are going to have. And then ultimately, most buyers are going to want to see the property before they close on it. So now you're going to want to start scheduling access with the seller on what that's going to look like to get the buyers put in. If it's a vacant deal, that's great. It's going to be real easy with the seller. But again, you still may be spending quite a bit of time going out to the deal because John, Nancy, and Shauna all want to see the property, but they can't make it at the same time. So now, 3 times you're driving out to the property and you're doing that. So you're handling, right? Like you're servicing your deal, you're handling all aspects of the process. Now let's move to the next stage, negotiating and closing the deal. This can be equally as cumbersome of a task as building your list and marketing your deal, because once you get all the buyers in, you've answered all the questions. Now you're getting into the negotiation phase with the buyer to ultimately pick the best buyer for the deal. Hopefully you've already set up a working relationship with a title company or a title entity, a title attorney's office, depending on the state that you're in, that can handle these kinds of transactions that we do as far as dispoing these deals. And now you've got that relationship established, you got the deal, you've got the buyer out, you've got them locked in, you've got it the title, now title's working. This is kind of the process. This is kind of what it looks like to do it all yourself. And there's pros and cons to it. For some wholesalers on this call, some wholesalers out there, like this is going to be the way that you want to go about doing it. And this is kind of really the process to expect when you want to handle the entire process of dispoing. Obviously the pros, you have full control over the process. Obviously you have a potential for a higher margin per deal, right? Like you've done all the work. Most of the margin between what you have it with the end buyer and what you've got it with the seller is pretty much all going to you because you've done all that work. Now the cons to this, right? Every process has its pros and cons. The cons, obviously time consuming. It requires a lot of you to handle the marketing, the negotiation, the closing. And honestly, this method can become overwhelming as your business scales. When I was kind of putting this all together, like the thought that came to my mind was, how many deals really do you think you could manage before running out of bandwidth? Right? Because as you do this, you can make a lot of money this way and you make a lot per deal. But ultimately, if your goals are to scale a business as compared to just getting a couple of wholesale deals here and there, maybe this isn't the process for you. Maybe another one of the processes that we talk about. So again, this is just the first process. There's nothing wrong with it. As a matter of fact, there's tons of wholesalers that have made a bunch of money doing this process. So I don't want it to seem like I'm coming off as like this isn't a good method, because all 3 of these methods are great. It's just figuring out which one is going to work for you. Method two, let's talk about the second method, which is using different online wholesale marketplaces to get your deals in front of buyers, which is essentially outsourcing part of the disposition process, but not the entire thing, right? So step one, obviously there's plenty of online platforms out there that will let you post your deals in there for free. And then there's even some that may even charge a small to a large fee to do so. It's just, the kind of buyers that it may be getting in front of. I would have you go do your own research of what's going to work for you, because some of you may have some resources that others may not. So some of you, it may make sense to pay a large fee to get your deal in front of a lot of buyers. Some you're going to go the free route. And that's ultimately if you want to go with this process. So I would say do a quick Google search and find those online marketplaces, reach out to them if you feel like this is kind of how you want to go about it. And then ultimately the steps 2 and 3 are essentially a lot of the same as far as the process goes with method 1, where the only thing really this outsources is you kind of building that list. You're basically buying or capturing for free a list that someone else has already created, but now it's on you to continue to service the buyers as they come, get everything to close. You're still holding the contract, but the laborsome process of building and maintaining a buyer's list is not something really you have to do going this way. You can just market it to potential buyers online, and you've got that automated from the get-go. So pros and cons of this method. The pros, you get your deal in front of a large audience with minimal effort, and then you still can control the process. If that's what you want to do, you want to be in control of most of the process. The cons are you have kind of a limited control over who the deal is marketed to. And so a lot of times, like with different regulations and things like those are some things that you may want to be wary of. And then ultimately, a lot of these sites also, you'll run into just other wholesalers who are wanting to go in, like the young lady had spoke about at the beginning of this call, where she ran into kind of a daisy chain system where she thought she had an in buyer. Turns out they were just also wholesaling the process, things like that. And there's nothing wrong with having multiple people to help you find a buyer and get a deal done, but it can just get really messy if you're not aware of it. And so it's, ultimately you want to be very careful with that process. You want to make sure that you're vetting the buyers when you're going that route, because you didn't vet them to begin with. You didn't meet them at a local meetup and had multiple conversations to understand what they've got going on. And then obviously, again, very time consuming. You kind of have a jump on getting your deal in front of a lot of people, but a lot of times, maybe especially if it's a really good deal, you may have a bunch of potential buyers reach out to you for it. So now you're spending a lot of time servicing those buyers coming in, answering questions, scheduling showings, doing those things before you ultimately find a buyer for it. So again, just like the first method, this method, it has its pros and cons. It just depends on where you're at and kind of where you want to go. Let's move on to the third method. And obviously that method is just completely automate the system, the disposition process for you. And that can look different even within itself, right? So some of you may be lucky enough or blessed enough to run into somebody who's able to help you, and they've got some systems in place and they can kind of really help you automate this process altogether and or to dispo your deals. And that's great. And if you're in that position, I would say go for it. Obviously, like anything else, just be wary, be careful, right? Who you're working with, and make sure that they're doing everything above board. Educate yourself to make sure you're doing everything above board. Another way to automate, obviously, is going with companies like New Western, who completely automate the process for you from beginning to end, where essentially all you have to do is get a deal under contract. You work with your New Western agent, present the deal to them. They run the deal, kind of tell you what they think they need for it on price. If you can make it happen and you're good with the spread that you're going to make on the deal, contract it with New Western. And then literally, other than working with the seller on access, that's kind of the first step of the process is connect and start to build that relationship with New Western. And although obviously it completely automates the disposition process as far as selling the deal, another really kind of value add is understanding that, you're working with the experts in the market that they're currently in. Every market that we're in, we have licensed agents that are working only in that market and at such a high rate. You know, Matt had said something along the lines of us buying and sell a home every 13 minutes. And that is true. We get deals done at a high rate. And so that allows us to work with wholesalers in a way that we don't make a lot of money per deal. We can make our living in the volume that we do. So you're going to get a lot of feedback and a lot of that local market knowledge on things, because obviously they're licensed, so they're pulling from the MLS, and that's like the best comps that you can get. But it's more than that, because we are working in such a high volume. We can really kind of begin to see real time what buyers are paying for in that market and give you pricing guidance and things like that when you're negotiating with the seller, so that you can ultimately have a little bit of ammo in your pocket when you're going into the negotiation with the seller. So once you get a deal contracted with us and access is set up, pretty much you're free to spend your time looking for your next deal, so that you can begin to build that pipeline to begin to scale your business within the market that you're in. And then also nowadays, I imagine there are probably some of you on here who are doing more of the virtual wholesaling thing, or maybe you're set up in a certain market and you're looking to expand to other markets, and where going this route can help you out and scale is you've got a relationship with somebody who's basically boots on the ground for you out there to access the properties, again, give you that feedback, things like that. So that's kind of what the process looks like of automating it. So let's go over the pros and cons of this method. Obviously, it's a hands-off process, right? New Western does everything for you. Other groups like us, if we're not in the market that you're in and there's another group that's in the market, if we're in the market that you're in, that process is handled for you in its entirety. So it's fast and efficient. You get access to a large buyer pool. I know for us, I can speak for us, we've got about 200,000 in buyers in our market, and that's actual buyers buying from us. That's not just email accounts. That's our agents have working relationships with these buyers and are servicing their buyers list and know what they want and what they're looking for. And then obviously the biggest pro is the scalability and growing. I would say the majority of the time, you're not going to make as much per deal as you would if you handled the whole process for yourself. There are some times where you still would, but really where the scalability comes in is where in the same time it might take you to do one deal, you can do 2, 3, 4, 5 deals, because you're outsourcing that process. You've outsourced the front side with DealMachine, working with them to where ultimately all you're doing is finding sellers, motivated sellers, working with them to get the contract and help them out as best as you can to get their deals closed. Save them from foreclosure, inheritance, things like that, right? All the different ways that we come across it. So the cons, again, are the less control over the process and, a chance at a smaller payout per deal. So that's kind of the third method. A couple of pro tips I wanted to give for dispoing, whether any method that you pick of the three that you think is going to help you the most, I would say provide a clean deal. What do you mean, Jimmy, provide a clean deal? Like, we're selling distressed properties. We're finding distressed properties. I mean, make sure to have all the paperwork in place. Either have clear title on the property or have someone working on it to get it clear, like a title company, something like that. Be transparent about the condition of the property to the end buyers. Be transparent to the sellers, with what you're doing. At the end of the day, just a pro tip from us. Take it from me personally. Back in the day, when I first started in this wholesaling thing, I was kind of going about the way that traditionally what wholesalers would do was just kind of act like the end buyer. Then, as we've grown, as I've grown, as I've done more transactions, the things that I've understood and kind of found that are, as far as that goes, when you're transparent with the seller about what you're doing, when these little fires that come up that you got to put out before you get a deal to close, it's so much easier to get it done and get it handled with sellers. And ultimately, there's cleaner deals. You get more deals done. I'm telling you, trust me, it's just the best way to go about it is being transparent in both sides, with the seller and the buyer, with exactly what you're doing. And then, obviously you're trying to offer the hassle-free, efficient transaction to them. And then the last tip I would say, especially if you're going one of the first two routes of this, just make sure you know your buyer. Understand the preferences they have, try to tailor the deals that they're looking for to them, and ultimately make sure that you're vetting them correctly. Make sure that they have the money before you put them in a contract to get it done. Make sure that if your buyer is using a lender, that it's a lender that's actually going to show up to the closing table. And as far as that, I mean, that's another plus. I mean, just as I'm saying it, that's another plus. Like, we do all those things. So all that stuff is also already taken care of. So again, not to make it sound like I'm just doing a sales pitch to you here. I want you to truly believe that all three of these methods, depending on where you're at and how you want to go, can be a successful way of dispoing deals and ultimately make you make money. So there's no one that I would say above the other, just depending on what you've got going on.
Thanks for listening to the DealMachine Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please leave us a review and follow along wherever you're listening to your podcast.